Welcome everyone to the Lockdown Series episode 9. My name is Philip, and today we're going to talk about Slackline accidents. Before we start though, I would just like to do a small little advertising plug for the windy folks. We are collecting information about highlands that got destroyed or nearly destroyed in windy conditions. So if you had this happen to you, please use the link in the description or in the comment feed or on Facebook to type in your data so we can find out more about how much wind and how much tape are good choices and how much wind and how little tape are bad choices. So, when I say we talk about accidents, what I really mean is we're talking about the Slackline accident and incident report forms. I'm going to call them SAIR forms because it's very difficult to say Slackline accident and incident report form 100 times in 1 hour. So they're going to be called SAIR form. And what you see on the screen right now is our website. And on the website, you find these 5 links to the different languages that we have. Now, usually the way it goes is you go outside, rig a slackline, and then you do something stupid and you get hurt. And whenever that happens, you're supposed to write one of these incident report forms. Now, it's probably too difficult to remember the link, so the easiest way to find this website is you just go on Facebook and then you select the group Slack chat and post about your accident. And then the very first comment on that post will always automatically be a link to this form. Okay, so this is how you find it. And usually what we do is we gather those reports once people have filled them out. And by now we've collected 500 of those. And we started in 2012 with only the English reports, and then we added French and German and Portuguese and Spanish by now. And we have about half of the reports in English and half of the reports in the other languages, most of them though in German and in French. And the tendency has been that every year we get more and more reports. Now, as the ISA Safety Commission, what we do is at the end of every year, we look at those reports and sort of try to make a statistical analysis. And then we publish a written report that tells you what kind of accidents happened, what new kind of accidents we're seeing. We tell you what are the most likely accidents, what kind of lines are the most dangerous, and so on and so forth. And you can find all of those reports on our website. And sometimes we also give talks at festivals or at the annual safety event. And basically, all the information that we get out of these reports is already on the internet. So what I thought, instead of just going over it again and telling you, tie off your weblogs, perform a body check and all of this, we're going to do a little different presentation today, kind of more interactive one. But before we start, I'm just going to tell you a little story about myself to get you in the correct mindset and to really help you understand how I feel about the accident report forms and how I go about them when I first read them. So a while ago, when I was still in uni, I was I was living on a hill and I was taking the bike and was cycling down the hill into the park to go slacklining, and then up a hill again to go to uni, and then back down the hill to go in the park and slacklining, and then back home in the evening. And one day, in the very early morning, I took my bike and went down the hill, and the next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed, and it's the middle of the night. So apparently what happened is I had a bike accident, and I ran into a car, or a car ran into me, I don't really know, and no one ever found out. But I lost my memory for probably 6 hours. And so somehow I found my way back home, and my roommates thought something was wrong with me because every 6 to 10 seconds, I just started over. I would reset and ask the same questions over and over again, like, how did I get here? Where's my bike? Who are you? And things like this. So they took me to the hospital, and it was very, very late, and I was still like repeating all over and all over and all over. And at some time I fell asleep and they left, and I was waking up in hospital all alone, and this is like the first memory I can still remember. So when I woke up, I had like big bandages all around my head, I had like stitches across my face, I had still some dry blood here. And the first thing I did is to stand up, go outside in the hospital hall, and look for a wheelchair. And as soon as I found a wheelchair, I started doing like wheelies in the wheelchair, and I would like wheelie all the way into the elevator, go up and down the elevator, even try to go down some stairs in the wheelchair while doing wheelies. And at some point, a nurse found me. And the moment I saw her, I knew that something was very, very wrong, because she had the most angry face you can possibly imagine. Like if you go to like WordPress, if you go to Microsoft Word and you look at like this really bright red, that's the color of her face. And she started yelling at me so loudly and so angrily that a lot of the patients that could barely walk, that were also in the hospital at the time, tried to like get out of their rooms and escape the situation because it was just unbearable. She was so angry. And apparently what has happened is it wasn't the first time I woke up, and it also wasn't the first time that she found the same person, which is me, doing wheelies on a wheelchair while having like a bandaged head and like a big scar on their face. And she told me this was the sixth time, and if she finds me again, she's going to throw me out of the window so that she doesn't have to deal with it again. Now, the story itself maybe doesn't make any sense, but since then, sometimes when I wake up in the morning or when I'm like half asleep, I still wonder whether or not I'm still lying in that hospital bed, like in a coma with like drooling out of my mouth and just imagining the world. And lately, with all the things that are going on, the news being crazier and crazier, like the American president asking people to inject themselves with disinfectant, things like this, I'm no longer sure if I'm still awake or if I'm still in a coma. And this craziness that you see when you read the news these days and think, man, is this world really real? Like, is someone making this up or is it actually happening? This is the same feeling I get when I read some of those reports. So it basically looks like this. Big red question mark here, the animation. And this feeling of disbelief, this feeling of basically what the actual fuck is going on, how did people survive this, is the feeling you get when you read the accident reports. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be nice to share this feeling with everyone else? So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you for your help, and we're going to look at some of the accident reports that I got so far. They're from all over the years, and there's some fake ones and there's some real ones. And your task is to go and decide whether the accident I showed you is a real one or a fake one. And first thing you have to do is you have to open the link in the description. So if you look at the video, at the very bottom, you'll find a description link, and it's going to say something like, click this link to win a t-shirt. And this, you have to open this one, and then you get to a Google form. And once you've opened this one, you'll see there's 6 accidents that we're going to look at. And for every accident, you have to decide whether it's real or not. Okay, it's just multiple choice question. There's nothing in between. Either I made this up or it actually happened, right? And then if you get all of the accidents correctly, you can win one of the ISA shirts I just showed you. Okay? So please, let's go open the link. Maybe Laurent, you can post it again in the YouTube comments so people can find it. and let's go investigate. I hope all of you opened the form. If you haven't, don't worry. We're going to do a little test round just to help you understand how the game is going to work. And it starts like this. So a long time ago in Switzerland, there was this guy, and his name was Samuel Bollery. And Samuel Bollery was a really good slackliner. But you know, like back in 2012, 2013, people were all into like really tight trick lines. And what he was doing all day was bouncing. He was bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. And the harder he bounced, the higher he jumped. And he just kept bouncing and bouncing, and he really wanted to get like the world record for the highest possible bounce. And one day he bounced so hard that he reached escape velocity and accidentally bounced off the edge of the world. Okay, sorry to all the flat earthers out there. My earth is round. That's the only stock photo I found. And if you look closely, you can see him leaving the solar system. Here he goes. Now this is just a test run. Obviously, this is a real story. We all know how Sam got his superpowers. But as soon as I click on the next screen, we're going to start for real, and you're going to see the small number and on the left corner to see which accident we're talking about. And at the end, I'm going to ask you if it's real or if it's fake. And then you get to decide and win a t-shirt. Is this clear? Were there any questions, Laurent?
No, it looks okay. Is there only one fake accident or multiple?
No. It's completely random. There's some fake, some real ones. It's your task to decide. Okay, here we go. This is accident number 1. Now imagine this. We're still in Switzerland. It's a couple years ago on the Molaison. And it's really nice weather. And if you've never been there, it's basically a mountain full of grass. And on that mountain, this guy decided to rig some lines. And I know the stock photo isn't perfect, but imagine behind the bushes there is a big cliff where you can rig like 400, 500 meter high lines. This is what he was doing. However, because there's so much grass and people don't want to pay, people in Switzerland don't want to pay for lawnmowers, they have sheep everywhere. And in order for those sheep not to accidentally fall off the cliff, there's this electrical fence. It goes all around the cliff. So in order to rig, you have to jump back and forth over this electrical fence and try not to jump onto the sheep. Now what happened at the end of the day, after all was said and done, this guy jumped over the fence one last time, and then unfortunately his hangover flips the fence, and of course this is an electrical fence. So once his hangover, like this, clipped over the fence, he got shocked, right? So now he's clipped to the fence in his harness with his hangover around, and he can't get it off because every time he touches the hangover, he gets zapped. And it looks a little bit like this. Okay, after about 2 minutes of struggling, he actually gets the harness off. Still hasn't figured out how to get the hangover off the electric fence and how to get his harness back. And then, of course, the sheep making some bad noise to make fun of him. My question, is this real or is this fake? Now you get to decide to see if you can win. Okay, I hope you made your decision. Shouldn't be too difficult. Moving on. Accident number 2. Again, we have a high line. This one's a bit shorter, maybe like 40 meters. It's in Greece. It's very nice weather. Super hot, nice day. However, this high line, as you can see, isn't at the top of the cliff. It's sort of halfway in there. And in order to get up, there's this small safety rope. and it doesn't even reach the bottom because the people were on holiday. They didn't take a long enough rope. So the rope goes from the anchor to about a height of maybe 10 meters. So you have to free solo the beginning. Then you tie into the rope, put a gree or an ascender or whatever, and then you ascend the rest of the rope to the anchor, tie in, and then highline. This is what was supposed to happen. However, our smart little guy here had the following idea. He free soloed the beginning, easy. Then he didn't have a gree and he didn't have an ascender. What he did instead was just tie in to the end of the rope, like normally. So if he climbed up and fell down later, it would stop him before he hit the ground. Seems like a good idea, right? That's what it says, smart idea. Now, of course, he started climbing, and he's athletic, but he hadn't much experience with climbing. So as he came to sort of a difficult section, he saw, okay, up there is a really good hold. I'm just going to jump for it. So he jumps, reaches it with his left hand, grabs onto the hold, and of course the following had to happen. He held onto the rock, he broke loose, and he threw it away. Now, when you have something like this happen to you, the next thing that goes is you fall down. And as he fell down, he tried to keep his feet underneath himself, but slowly started to roll backwards. Now, luckily, he didn't tie in like the small little graphic guy here, but into this harness. So as he was coming to the end of the rope, it started to stretch and slow him down ever so slightly. Unfortunately, though, when things go wrong, they tend to go really wrong. So the next thing that happened is that the rope snapped over a sharp edge, and even though he was slowed down a little bit, the guy just kept falling. Athletic and lucky as he is, he kept his feet underneath himself and just basically ran down the cliff almost vertically and decided to jump away so he wouldn't start flipping over and over and over. After jumping away, he started falling and falling and falling even further until he finally, luckily again, fell into the ocean, barely missing his head on some big rocks in the water. Now, is this real or is this fake? Because can you really be that lucky? I hope you're making your decision.
Just a little thing, Philip.
Yes.
Because in the form,
Yes.
you put it the numbers 1 with Samuel, but
That's wrong. Sorry. Number
yeah.
1 is the sheep accident.
Okay.
Yeah, the form is a bit older. I'm sorry, guys. I totally forgot to change that. Yeah, number 1 is the sheep accident. Number 2 is the one that we discussed right now with the extremely lucky person. Okay. So we go on to the next one. You can also always reference to the left corner to see the number of the accident. Those should still be okay. Our next accident is a real highline this time. It's 90 meters long in the Austrian Alps. Really high, really exposed, big highline. Tight backup for training purpose. And here we have this super sporty guy, and very early in the morning, he starts walking. And he keeps walking, and he keeps walking all day. As you can see, the sun goes up, sun goes down, and he keeps walking all night. Moon goes up, moon goes down. Now, at the end of the day, what he thought he would look like is something like this. Okay, super buff, super trained. What a good day. Unfortunately, the next morning he wakes up looking a bit more like this. Okay, this guy had a slackline session that was so intense that he had inflammation in his arms that wouldn't go away for 8 months. So he couldn't slackline, couldn't go climbing for almost half a year. Is this real or is this fake? You get to decide now. I'll give you a couple seconds before we're moving on to the next scenario. Sounds really good. So imagine this. Again, we have a highline as usual. And even though you can't see it on the picture here, there's actually a highliner on the very left. So this highline is like 80 meters long. And he has headphones in his ears, or around his ears. He's walking back and forth, doing some bounce tricks. All is good in the world. And he's bouncing so well, he's tricking so well, that a cow comes by to check him out. And the cow wants to take a closer look at the rigging, because it looks a little bit sketchy. So he goes really close and unfortunately gets one of his horns stuck in the anchor material. So he's thinking like, what am I going to do? And gets really angry. Flips the shit out and destroys the anchor material. Luckily, the line doesn't immediately fail. Cow is stuck, rips apart the span sets. The guy slides off as fast as he can. And at some point the cow actually gets free. And everyone's thinking, what the fuck's going on? And again, is this a real accident or is it a fake accident? Also, let's watch the cow flip one more time. No, the flip. There it goes. Okay, 2 more to go. I hope you're still following along. The next accident is probably the most extreme one. So we have a highline, like 37 meters long. And if you've been following closely, you've seen this rock before. Okay? Unfortunately, the people who rigged this line haven't seen this presentation. So they don't know what's about to happen. So they decide, go on the line, walk across as you do. But since you've seen the presentation, you already know what's going to happen. The rock, of course, it's going to fail. The entire anchor goes haywire and slides down the mountain. Now this guy is really scared, so he holds onto the line. And watch this. It's like real Tarzan all across the cliff, smacks into the other side of the mountain. And then after being asked how he is, if he's still alive, he just yells back, YOLO, and is almost completely fine. Can actually walk back home. Now, is this a real accident or a fake one? Okay. Here's your last chance to win the t-shirt. If you got all of them right so far, this is the last test. Again, we have a highline. I hope it's not boring by now. But this time it's in the mountains, like the real mountains. And if you look closely, there's already a cloud in the background. That's going to be more important later. So here's this girl walking on a 25 meter long, about 25 meter high, very, very alpine highline. And it's her first highline ever. She has some experienced friends at the anchor, but this is her first session on her first real highline. So she's somewhere in the middle, trying to stand up, bounces around a little bit, and there's more and more clouds coming in. It gets really dark. It becomes windy. You can like feel the static in the air, this bad energy. So what she decides, okay, I need to get off. Everyone at the anchor is telling her, time to go. So she's on the far anchor, clips her hangover in, and slowly slides across, hand over hand over hand, rolling along the entire surface of the webbing. Now, as she goes closer to the end, she turns around and she tries to put her foot on the ground. And as she does that, she gets electrocuted, like zapped so hard that she jumps back several meters, rolls back into the middle of the line. Everyone heard a loud like bang sound, like an electrical zap sound, and she's rolling back, not terribly hurt, but you know how it feels like when you get like a proper zap. So she's out there thinking, what the fuck? So everyone tells her, maybe just try again. And at the same time, they hear in the anchor material, underneath the padding, like the small crackling of electricity. And they know what happens to SAM's lines usually, but so they look around. They don't see Sam anywhere. They can't believe it. It's still like a lightning line without Sam. So she tries to come back, gets zapped a couple of times, and then finally, after maybe 5 or 6 like really serious zaps, she gets off and is safe. Now they derect as fast as they can because more and more clouds are coming in, and in the end they didn't find any damage on the webbing. One last time. Is this real or is this fake? Okay, so for everyone who played along, I hope you enjoyed this little segment. The talk isn't over, don't worry. There's more cool animations coming. But you have to submit your answers now. It's very important because I'm going to give you the solution. And if you submit your answers too late, they can't be counted towards winning a t-shirt. So now for me, it's 1936. I'm going to wait a couple more seconds, and all the answers that are submitted afterwards are not counted. So please send away the form. Don't forget to put a correct email address. A lot of people do this wrong in the SAIR forms as well. See this as kind of a practice. I have like half of the email addresses I try to write back to. No one ever answers. So if you want the shirt, write a correct email address. Right. So as most of you have probably guessed, all of the accidents were actually real, except for, of course, the very first one with Samuel Wallery. He didn't accidentally jump into space. Now, before we go further, I would just like to give some honorable mentions, because these 6 accidents are somewhat crazy maybe, but they aren't even the best ones. Unfortunately, I can't show you the best ones because the people who submitted them want to remain anonymous and they don't want their accident to be published. They don't want any media about them. Like some of the accidents, there's still like ongoing insurance claims and stuff like this where we can't comment or we can't publish them at the moment. However, there's some accidents that I'd really like to show. And the first one, if you're sensitive to pain, and you can really imagine what it feels like to hurt, then you should probably mute and look away for the next like 30-40 seconds, because this one is really uncomfortable. Don't worry, I won't show any graphic material. Everything's just going to be this cartoon style. There's going to be no pictures, like no blood, no broken bones, no torn off fingers or anything like this. We have the pictures, but I'm pretty sure that YouTube would ban us if I show them in a live stream. So it's just going to be text, but this is one of the one of the quotes that's going to make you feel a little bit icky about slacklining for a while. Now, here it goes. I completely botched that. Sorry. The first section that's going to come is the honorable mentions, of course. It's not going to be my favorite quotes. But here's some important milestones, I would say. So the first recorded webbing slippage that we have was 2014 on a waterline in the States. And the longest written paragraph was more than 800 words on a twisted ankle in French. The French usually write like the most words in the descriptions, but 800 plus words on a twisted ankle is a bit much. I mean, be concise, like give us every detail. Don't write a book. Next, the accident with the most injured people, right now that's the record, is 4 injured after a bee attack in India. And I'm going to comment, this is for Dean Greenwood, who just sent an accident report fairly recently, reminding us about a video he uploaded 7 years ago. And it's 240p. You can't see anything. But if you look really closely, he thinks, and after watching it 100 times, I think so as well, accidentally free soloed by not finishing his figure 8. So that's also a good reason to send us an accident report. If you want more views on your video, just send us an accident report, link your video, and I'm going to watch it 100 times to find everything that's wrong with it. And then one more, this is for Chris. He submitted his handwritten records of his first Highland attempts, and it's some of the craziest stuff that you can read. Absolutely amazing. Oh, this is what I wanted to explain earlier. If you don't want to read this, just look away for 30 seconds. But for anyone else, enjoy. So this is an accident report we got a couple years ago, and I'm going to read the quote for everyone who's just watching on their smartphone maybe and can't read the text. It says, I quote, "I eventually got a hospital where after an ultrasound, they decided I need a scrotal exam, cut me up, see what's inside. So they performed the surgery and find my right testicle had exploded, and they removed it." Now this is pretty severe. Usually with this type of injury, if you get to the hospital really fast, you might get the chance to live with both testicles. However, the doctor said that in my case, it didn't really matter as it was completely destroyed. So this happened on a completely normal line. The guy just slipped, it went up right between his legs, and one of his testes exploded. So when you read these forms, and once you work with them, every time you're on a Slackline, there's all these different images in your head of all the different accidents you've read about, and it becomes really difficult to enjoy it. But we're not going to go too far into that. Now, this is what I look like when I read the report, and we go on to the next one. So the next quote is not quite as graphic as the last one, but it says, "A 200-meter highline was rigged with marathon main and pink tube backup." And then it just says, "Not my setup." We get a lot of those where people just explain an accident that happened or something that almost got wrong. And then at the very end, sometimes in brackets, sometimes in all capitals, they say, "It's not my setup. A friend told me. I saw this years ago." Whenever you're submitting a report, don't worry about it. It's fairly unlikely that whatever stupid shit you did, someone did something way stupider before. Don't feel ashamed to send us your stupidest accidents. We've seen much worse than whatever you did recently. Okay? So if it's an accident, you don't feel very proud of it, still send it in. It's not like anyone's ever going to read the accident report form, except for the SAIR people. Okay? Don't worry, your identity is safe with us, Jason. And then one last category of quotes that I have is it's very difficult. So if you've never seen the form before, what you do is you open it up, and then it asks you some basic questions, like what's your name, how old are you, where you're from, where did the accident happen, when did the accident happen, how many people were involved, what kind of lines were there, what was the weather like. And this guy here, he filled all of this with like sensible data. Like he told me his name, he told me his email address, then he told me what the weather was like, where it was, when it was, how many people were involved. And then as it comes to the descriptions, he just says this. And if you don't speak Spanish, I'm just going to translate for you. It says, "There was no accident." So he fills out the form, gives me all the multiple choice answers I could get, and then just says, "There was no accident." So now I'm thinking, what is this? Is this like some kind of hostage situation where he can't tell us what really happened? Did he forget halfway through? Like, what's going on? If you were the person that sent me this accident, please tell me if you're okay. I tried reaching you on your email. It didn't work. You indicated that you don't want your name published, so I can't look you up on Facebook or ask my friends if they know you. If you wrote this accident and said there was no accident, please tell me that there really was no accident. I'm worried. We have more quotes sort of in this way. This one is French and it says, I don't remember. Okay, just gonna go with that. And then we get a lot of those. Test, what's your name? Test, when did it happen? Test. And I guess some of those are from us. Sometimes we change something on the website, or we edit a link, or we do something in our Google Drive, like move the forms around, and we have to check. But there's a couple of those that don't come from us. I'm 100% sure. Maybe someone's messing with me, or they really don't understand how the forms work. If you write test, and then send it, you're never going to find out if it worked or not. Okay, so just trust the system, type the answers that you want, and send it. Okay, sometimes people send it twice, slightly different answers. It's really difficult to see if there's like two accidents, but don't write test. Yes, it works, or it doesn't work. You're never going to find out. Now, before we go to the last quote, I have to explain the situation a bit further. So imagine this. This is Canada. I know it's not the best stock photo, but it's Canada in February. So it's really, really cold. And I know the sky is red. It doesn't convey the coldness very well. But again, it's the only stock photo I found. And then you have to imagine it wasn't quite as nice as this. Or rigging a line across this river, in reality much bigger, and there were mountains on the left and mountains on the right. Now, because it's Canada and these were Canadians rigging that line, they must have thought, well, it's cold outside, that's just normal, and they decided to rig this water line. And this guy, he descends all the way from the cliff down right next to this stream. And in the summer, this is a nice line. This is like a 20-30 meter water midline that they rig from time to time in the summer. And in the summer, there's also a lot less water. So this is February. The snow is starting to melt. It's still like 0 degrees outside. But there's a lot of water. There's heavy currents. There's ice shelves floating around. It's really cold. There's snow everywhere. And what this guy's thinking right now is, I'm going to swim across, holding the tagline in my hand, through a raging river that's almost freezing at the same time. I'm going to do that naked, right? Because I want a Slackline, and who cares, right? This is what people do. And here's his accident report. Because when you do something like this, you will have to send an accident report. There's no way around this. If you do something stupid, please make it at least as stupid as this, or better, right? If you go for something, really go for it. Now here's his report, and I quote, "We're all in our positions, and I'm standing by the base of the gorge, assessing the river once more. There was a moment of doubt, telling me how utterly stupid the idea is. For some reason, I ignored my intuition and made the decision to just check it out. If another person had been down there with me, I would have received a second opinion, reiterating the stupidity of crossing that river. We'd have called it off. Of course, that's not what happened. I took my clothes off and hopped in." Now, in his defense, he's a pretty tough guy. But if you hear something in your head telling you this is a stupid idea, you should listen. The problem is, these days, everyone and everything is screaming at you. And the voice of reason, I imagine, sounds a little bit like Jerry. It's a very calm voice, and it's a very rational voice. and it's talking to you very quietly. But if you hear Jerry in your head saying, don't do it, don't do it, okay? Listen to the Jerry in your head. Or write a report like this. Either way is fine. I guess ultimately it's your choice. But what I want to say with this is, did people really hear the voice of reason? This isn't the only report like this that we have. It's the funniest or the stupidest. But there's maybe 10, 15 reports where people say that before they got into the accident, they had this moment where something in their belly like sank down. It's a really strange feeling. It's not the same as like getting your balls busted from the line underneath, but it's sort of in the same region. It's not quite as intense. So you get this sinking feeling in your stomach, you hear the Jerry voice behind you, and when this moment arrives, it's time to just turn around and go home, okay? Because either you listen to this, or you get to write an accident report. So what I want to say ultimately, people really hear the voice of reason. This is not made up, this actually happens, and they never listen. Or at least the reports I get are, of course, from the people that don't listen. So if you maybe want to tell me that you heard the Jerry in your head tell you not to do something, sorry, there's some feedback. Maybe you can mute yourself. Thanks. If you hear the Jerry in your head tell you not to do something, do it. You'll be better off. Okay? Now, the next quote isn't from a Slackliner per se. It's this quote, and it's from Donnie Hall. And Donnie Hall does a very different sport than ours. She's also much older than we are. But I think the quote still applies. I'm just going to read it to you. And it says, "It was a terrible tragedy when people started dying. It was painful because something I loved so dearly was killing people. I couldn't get that. I couldn't rationalize that part. Here, I had this passion, this love for this. I mean, real true love for this activity and for what really was the focal point of my life. And this wonderful thing was killing people." As I said, Donnie wasn't a slackliner. When she said this, slacklining wasn't even born. What she was doing was hang gliding. And hang gliding, much like slacklining, originated in the States a couple years back. And in a sense, it's very different. I mean, you're in the air all by yourself, like you're suspended from nylon and polyester filaments that are holding you in the air. You're really relying on this equipment to be safe, and you're moving your body to the left and to the right in order for you to just enjoy the space and not fall down. This is what hang gliders are doing. It's also pretty much exactly the same what we are doing, just upside down. Now, when hang gliding started, it started much like slacklining did. So people were on grassy fields, smoking weed, bunch of hippies, and they decided with like the equipment that they had to just run down the mountain, strap some gliders on their back, and float a couple feet off the ground just down the hill. Pretty much exactly what we did with slacklining at the beginning. Short lines, short flights, very low to the ground. But people soon started to just go for longer and longer and longer flights, much like slackliners did with longer and longer lines. And at some point, the gliders and the people got so good and so confident that they started flying higher and higher and higher. And this, again, is also the story of slacklining, to a degree, I guess. And at some point, the gliders were good enough to actually fly, like really fly and soar and gain height and get so high that when you had an accident, it got really bad. And the activity got so popular that a lot of new people came in, and there was a lot of like garage built sort of crappy equipment, and the new people got the crappy equipment because it was cheap, or they got the second-hand equipment because it was cheap, and they did their first tries, and there were so many accidents. So many people died in the early years of hang gliding because no one knew what was going to happen, and there was no oversight from any agency. There were no standards, there were no schools, there were no courses. People just tried. And what I don't want to happen, and I think I share this feeling with all of you and all of the people at the ISA, I don't want slacklining to be like hang gliding, where like when someone does a documentary 30 years later and asks all the OG slackliners, like, what was it like in the beginning? Did really everybody die? Was it that dangerous? Because that's what the people asked the hang gliders. Like, I watched this documentary. You can see it here at the beginning. It's called Blue Sky, hang gliding documentary. You can find it on YouTube. And at the very end, there's this like 5-minute section. And all the people that show up in the documentary, basically all of the OG hang glider community, they all had friends or wives or husbands die in hang gliding accidents. And this is not something that we want for us, I think. So what they did in order to stop this from happening, got like self-governed. They work with the FAA, that's the Federal Aviation Administration in the States, because that's where hang gliding started. Got training and licenses, so they organized clubs and schools, and they give courses to new pilots, and you had to get a certificate to fly in certain locations. And then lastly, they got manufacturing guidelines, so that the gliders that you bought, they were built to international standards. They were actually safe. They wouldn't just stall out or break in half. And if you see and read this, it's basically exactly the same that we've been doing. And this isn't by accident. This is by design. Like hang gliding is one of the sports we looked at the very beginning to see how do we organize the ISA. What are the most pressing issues that we have? And here a small plug. Again, this is our website. And what we want to do is we want to help people. And the accident report forms are just one of the methods that we have. But we also give courses, we give rigor certifications, we have safety standards now. And if you're interested in working in this kind of stuff and helping us out, just hit me up with a message, leave a comment here or on Facebook, and we'll add you to our Discord server, and then you can help us analyze the accidents, for example, or work on some other stuff. Just a small plug here. Okay, we're almost at the end. So until now, I've just been giving you like an insight into what it's like for me or for the others at the ISA to work on the accidents. And I hope that I could show you a little bit what it's like and also entertain you with some of the stupid graphics and the funny accidents that happened. And if you want to know anything more specific, we already have on the website all the annual reports. We have talks like this where we went to festivals or the safety event and gave presentations about the SAIR forms. And you can see basically all of the information that we have, all of the things that we learned, either in written or in video form, right here. But there are some accidents that happened, some recently, some just never got any coverage. And those 4 or 5 accidents I want to cover here. So these are real accidents that happened. We're going to use real pictures for some of them, but don't worry, none of them actually show the injured people. But I think they still have some valuable lessons, even though some of the accidents didn't really like hurt anyone that badly. And the first one that we're going to look at is this A-frame right here. And if you look closely at the picture, I hope the resolution isn't shit. You can see a lot of good equipment. So for example, you can see the SMC pulleys here. Von Beast shackle right here, purple span set, really good. There's some tree pro around the A-frame, that's nice. There's a backup coming from the brake, going to separate sling and shackle right here. Don't worry if you can't read the text, it's not that important. There's a backup here from the end of the weblog, the tail is coming out of weblog. So this looks like a decent rig, okay? Maybe ignore this improvised shackle pin sort of situation that's here. I don't know what that is. It's just someone put like a conventional bolt and a nut through a shackle. There's no counter pin, there's no nothing. This is, except for this here, the rig is okay, you would think. And this is the case for a lot of the actions that go wrong. Like everything looks really good on first sight. Like the equipment is good, the techniques are safe, all the rigging is backed up. But then there's always this one little detail that is wrong. And it's hard to spot in the picture because this is actually a recreation. But I'm going to show you 2 more pictures of the rig, how it was beforehand. So at the bottom of the A-frame, you can see there's a rope connecting the 2 legs. Now here's the static rope because this is the next day after the accident and they just rigged the same line again, as you do. But originally it was this like cheap piece of garbage rope that was holding the 2 legs together. And you have this rope because if you don't, you can imagine that the A-frame where it's tucked together at the top has a lot of force pushing it downwards. And if you don't have that rope, the legs are just going to give out, okay, especially on a slippery surface like this. So the rope holds together the entire structure. So basically the frame itself has become an integral part to the rig. Because if this rope breaks or whatever, the entire thing is going to come apart and fly towards you or hit anyone who's standing close to the water. And what happened wasn't actually that the rope broke, because there isn't too much force usually in these connecting ropes here. But what happened is that the knot at the end was too small, so it got sucked right through the wood. And it's those little details that usually go wrong in the accidents. Okay, so you do everything right, you do everything according to protocol, but then there's this one detail that you didn't pay enough attention to. So what they did is they chose a rope which maybe isn't perfect. Yeah, you see it's just an open braid, so it's going to get a lot smaller under tension. And then I guess they also just took which drill bit they had to make this hole. So this hole is much too large to hold a rope that's this thin with a conventional stopper knot. So you have to do sort of a different solution here to make this work. You can see here that the next time they did this, they put a much bigger knot and they even went around the entire structure. This is a better solution to the problem. But this accident in particular really shows how small the things are that go wrong. And that is why we have the redundancy, because these are things you can miss and you will miss. If you rig enough lines, you will make a mistake like this. And it's really tiny, and in this instance it was inconsequential. But remember, like the tiniest thing can go wrong and then your entire rig comes apart, and you really, really want to have at least that one little backup that goes all the way from the weblog to the anchor. You don't want to know how many people aren't dead because someone just put like one extra knot somewhere. Okay, it looks messy, and maybe it is a bit crazy to just like put backups everywhere on everything, and in some instances it can be detrimental, but there's dozens of instances where this just one extra clip saved someone's life. So don't forget that. Next incident we're going to look at is this weblog design, or more specifically this pin design. I don't know if you know the difference, but I have a good weblog here. This is a lynx that's not produced anymore. But if you can see, the pin here is one solid body. So it goes from the handle all the way to the top, and there's some marks here, but it's one piece of stainless steel. With the cheap pins that are like this, the head is screwed on, and this mechanism that stops the pin from coming out. So in this case, it's ball locking, and there's these little triangles or these little pieces of metal that come out and prevent the the pin from coming out, but it's only screwed on. It's not a single piece. And what happens, I made this error so you can see better. What happens after some years, the glue is totally going to dry up. And then it becomes very easy to undo this. So easy, in fact, that either from pre-tensioning your weblock, so you pull through and the pin rotates, you're going to screw up the head, or you're going to screw up this part. And there's not much metal here. So if anything goes wrong, like in a leash fall, the pin just jumps a little bit, it's going to go. And we've had a couple of line failures, not necessarily on highlines, also on normal park lines, where this bit came undone and the pin just fell out. And was like the entire weblock just bends open and the line flies away. So if you have these older weblocks with this kind of pin design, check it. If you can unscrew this by hand, just throw it away. It's not safe anymore. And then one more thing that we're going to look at is harnesses. So most modern harnesses, and I hope you can see this, they have a buckle that you can just tighten. And once it's tight, it's tight. It's not going to come undone. It's pretty much like a weblock. So it only works in one direction. But some years ago, and for some manufacturers, they still do this, you had to push the webbing through the buckle and then feed it back to tighten it. So it wouldn't work if you only go the one way. So if you tighten it, it's not done. You have to add one more step to make it safe. And these kinds of harnesses are absolutely terrible. In slacklining alone, we've had 4 failures of this. Okay, 4 times people fell out of their harnesses, almost. Like the hip portion of the harness came undone because it wasn't double backed. Okay, if you see someone with a harness like this, or if you have a harness like this yourself, just don't use it anymore. They aren't safe. People aren't clever enough to do this for some reason. Okay, even though the instructions say you have to do this, it doesn't work. People forget this all the time. And in climbing, almost no one makes these harnesses anymore because there have been so many accidents. And in slacklining, I guess almost no one has this harness, but still there have been 4 people who fell out of this. And I think maybe we have 5 or 6 of those harnesses in total in all of the slackline community, just to show you how likely this is to go wrong. And in climbing, at least you notice sometimes because the rope is pulling on you. And on highlining, you will notice, but then it's too late. Okay, so if you see harnesses like this, just tell the people no, this is garbage. And it doesn't work in body checks either because they're so rare and people don't know that you have to check this. So if you have a harness like this, just cut it in pieces. Don't use it anymore. It's not safe. You shouldn't use it highlining. You shouldn't use it climbing. Feel free to disagree, but this is what the accident reports are telling us. And I would be pretty confident that all of the climbing associations would tell you exactly the same. So no double back harnesses anymore. And then lastly, just a graphic warning. This is one last picture of people hurting themselves. So if you don't want to see that, the next slide is going to be some pictures of people who hurt themselves. No blood though, just broken hands and fingers. This is a nice cartoon, and it says at the very bottom that people are afraid of leash falls. But you should also be afraid of catching. And catching really it's an art form. You have to learn this. And if you're not confident catching, and if you aren't good at catching, it's always best not to catch. Okay, just dive headfirst away, let the leash do its job, and get your hands away from the leash. Okay, a lot of people try to grab anything when they fall, and it always ends up like this. Okay, and this is also one of the pictures from the very beginning of the presentation. There's so many finger injuries on highlines. It's absolutely crazy. You wouldn't believe it because people, when you're slacklining, you don't really use your hands, but when you catch, you're going to break your hands. Okay, I'm not saying you can't catch. If you're good at catching, this won't happen to you, I guess. but tell beginners that catching is risky. It's always best to just dive away from the high line head first and let the leash do its job. All right. And then at the very end, I like to include this sentence in the reports I write and the presentations I give, is always remember that humans aren't made to operate at height, right? We're unlike birds. Our normal life, our biological life, isn't adjusted to operating at height. We're not meant to be 500 meters up in the air. So it's neither physically nor mentally. And that means if you fall from a great distance, you're going to die. You're not like an ant. You're not like a spider. You're not like a cat. If you fall, you're done. But it also means mentally. We don't have the focus or like the capacity to not make mistakes. Okay? It doesn't matter how experienced you are. It doesn't matter how often you've done something. You will make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes all the time. And this is also something that we see from the reports. The level or the amount of experience that people have, they don't matter. Beginners make mistakes. Expert makes mistakes. Professional slackliners make a lot of mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Okay? So you have to find some sort of way to prevent you from dying from a single mistake. Okay? And this is what redundancy, for me at least, truly means. It means that if you make one bad decision, you have made at least one good decision to cancel it out. Okay? Because if you don't, if you make one bad decision and you get unlucky, you're done. Okay? So always have that one extra safety. Always have another pair of eyes, like another brain to check what you're doing. Okay? It's easy to become complacent and say, okay, I've done this thousands of times. I know exactly how this goes. Don't. It will be too late when you hear that voice. Yeah. All right. That's basically it. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And if you have any questions, you can just comment or ask it in the Google Meet session. I'm going to be here for a while, answer all your questions if there are any. And I'll announce the winner of the t-shirt tomorrow on Facebook. And I'll also write you an email, of course, to get your address. So thanks very much for listening in. And I'm available for questions.
Thanks, Philip. I just wanted to mention that also it's not just catches on highlands that give all those finger injuries. There's a lot of leash tangling, so leash handling is very important, and also stopper knots after the 8 or loops that connect the 8 to your harness that are too big that catch your fingers.
Yeah.
And there we see a lot of injuries.
Yeah. Just do the Thomas pose. Hands behind your hand and go for it. Yeah. Take care of your fingers. Sarah's absolutely right. I hope everyone on the live stream actually hears the people talk on the Google Hangouts, but I think it should work. Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Hey, Philip.
Hey, Mariana. Your robot voice again.
Awesome. I was just wondering, what's the percentage breakdown between like accidents between the disciplines? Like, how many of the reports are about highlining, trick lining, long lining?
It changes a lot. So at the very beginning, we thought trick lining is super unsafe because most of the accidents were from trick lining. But now I think it just represents to a certain degree what people are doing. And a lot of the ISA involved people or the people on Slack chat aren't doing trick lines anymore. So we don't have any trick line accidents. But now we see a lot of highline accidents. That's because more people get into highlining, and there's just all the time there's more highlines as well. I mean, if you think back 5-6 years ago, yes, there were a lot of highliners, but nowadays there's no moment in time where there isn't a highline rigged on this planet. It's like a big wave of highlines all the time, basically. And so I think the forms just reflect what people are doing. So at the moment we get mostly highlines. I guess there's still most accidents by number will of course be on the basic slacklines, because most people are on basic slacklines, but they don't know the ISA, they don't know the form, and they don't feel like sending us an accident report if they just twisted their ankle or stepped on a piece of glass. So we don't have the breadth of answers to really say what is the most likely accident, because all our data is just a reflection of the people answering mostly. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Hello, Philip. Can you talk about like the midline accidents and the percentage difference when you have like proper gear resellers in the States, or when people like use the gear that they have in their home to start like midlining in the park or something like that?
So what we can say for sure is that there aren't many equipment failures. Okay, there are problems, as I said before, with, for example, weblocks. Some of them have the bad pin design with the pin that unscrews, or you often see the cheaper like homemade weblocks. They have this slot to get the pin in and out. This is one of the most common accidents we see, but we don't see very often that gear just fails. Okay, we don't have any leash rings exploding, for example. We don't have any weblocks exploding, at least on highlines. Webbing doesn't just break. It's always something else that goes wrong. We don't necessarily have an equipment problem, and the people that rig lines on non-professional, for example, like non-purpose made equipment, they're also less likely to know the ISA, I think, and they're also less likely to interact with us and send us accident reports. So I can't say for sure, but what we know is that equipment usually isn't a problem. It's almost always a rigging error or some other kind of decision that isn't good. For example, the most common failure, like complete failure, is with wind. So if you rig a longer high line and it's really windy and bad weather, it just blows the line away or it just rips the anchor apart. This is the most common problem. But I wouldn't say that this is a material failure. This is a decision that's been made, right? Does it answer your question?
There is though there are a few incidents. Can I just give a comment? There are a few incidents with sharp gear, like
yes,
sharp line slides or sharp blocks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there are a few, which are not failures of the equipment, but the equipment that's not made properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not how it should be.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
There is also some other question from Trek Tales, who asked how many mainline failures have been reported for highlines.
So how many mainline failures have been recorded? So we know at least 10 complete failures from wind alone. So these are are usually not a big problem, because the people they notice, they get off the line, and the line just gets blown away in most cases, except for the one in Brazil, unfortunately. But mainline failures where it happens like very suddenly when someone is on the line, maybe taking a leash fall or something, those are fairly rare. So I don't think there have been more than 20. And there haven't been many complete failures. So one of the complete failures that we had was quite a long time ago, in an example that Sarah just mentioned, where a high slide, so not a hangover, but before people had hangovers, they would use pulleys, and they had side plates. And on those side plates, they had really sharp edges. So this guy was gliding along a high line, and the device got twisted, and it cut through main and backup, and he just fell down. It wasn't very high. Luckily, it was a show. So he walked away fine, more or less. But all of the other mainline failures are usually being cut from abrasion. So we had one in a quarry in England, where the line just somehow jumped underneath the crash pad. That was the padding, and then it got cut on the slate, and the person was caught by the rope, the backup rope. We have a couple where the webbing comes uninstalled from the weblock because people didn't close the pin correctly, or they didn't have a good tie-off. And those are the most common. And then what people describe is they fall down like a considerable distance, like 4 or 5 meters, before the backup or the mainline catches them again. So yeah, that's there aren't too many, but they happen. Okay, it's not a stupid idea to have a backup. Yeah, that's a good book to read. Like, this is also something that we talk about in the rigging course. Okay, are there any other specific questions about the accidents? I'm interested to see how many people guessed the accidents correctly, actually. I think I could just watch real quick. No. If I watch it now, you guys can see it. That wouldn't be good because all the email addresses are there as well. Okay. Well, if no one else has any questions, I think we can end the stream. And if you're interested to help out with the Safety Commission, for example, just shoot me a message.
I think there was one more question.
Actually, there's more to this question. Sorry, I didn't read it. It says, how many mainline failures have ever been recorded? Okay, that we answered. For Highline Salso, how many recorded accidents? Do you know what that means, Sarah? Highline Salso? Is it free solo or? Oh, no, for Highlines also, sorry. How many recorded accidents of other walkers or cyclists having injury due to park lines? Those are actually quite common. We have a lot of accidents where people walk into lines, maybe where an old granny tries to step over the line and then you step off and she gets like double backflipped. We have a lot of dogs that have been shot around. Unfortunately, in America, a cyclist died after riding his bike into a long line. That was quite some time ago. Park lines are fairly dangerous to the public in general. So you have to be really, really careful with marking your lines. Maybe have good wind stoppers or something like this. Just be aware that your line is an obstacle that's almost invisible.
Yeah, there's also
Yes, Sarah?
I think there's also an ongoing lawsuit somewhere in Germany where I think there's also an ongoing lawsuit, I think, in Germany where a cyclist drove into a line that crossed the path.
Yep. There's a couple of accidents like this. I hope that answers your question. All right, I think I'm going to call it a day. It's dinner time here. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope I'm going to see you all next week on Heist Talk about Slackline memes. Okay, one more question from Michael. Any other worst case other than the poor cyclist in the States? I mean, 3 people injured by lines in the park. I mean, yes, there are some other accidents. A little girl was killed by a volleyball post that was used as a slackline anchor. That's also was it in the States, Sarah? At least in one of the Americas. I don't know if it was South or North America.
I think it was a lamppost in Brazil. Something they shouldn't have rigged off.
Yes, not a volleyball post. Yes, those are the 2 really unfortunate ones. For sure, there have been more. Sometimes you hear a news story and you try to follow up, but then it's especially if it's happening in the US, it's just you can't follow the people because there's an ongoing lawsuit or something, and then we don't get the information or we can't talk about it until the lawsuit or the insurance claim is resolved. But yes, there's a couple things go wrong with slacklining if you don't pay attention. Yeah, thanks Michael for the question. Yes, when people walk into lines, this happens all the time, but for some reason they usually don't get too unlucky. Like the accidents aren't that serious in most cases, unless you have a cyclist that goes into the line really fast. People stepping over or just getting caught and then whipped isn't that bad in most cases. Okay, I'm gonna end it now. Still be in the Hangouts for a second. So if you have a really urgent question and I already ended the stream, you can join the Hangouts. Bye bye.